The year was 1270, and in the Nordling realms, social turmoil and religious fanaticism had become the new status quo. In the forests outside Kaer Morhen, a white-haired witcher, previously thought dead, re-manifests into the world. Meanwhile, on an imperial throne built upon the graves of his foes, a man once named Dunny once more begins to plot the conquest of the North. Welcome to Wizards & Warriors' third video on the world of The Witcher. In this installment, we'll cover the eclectic geopolitical events of the first two Witcher games, examining the political deterioration of the Northern Realms and how it led to the beginning of the Third Nilfgaardian War. Witchers utilize a variety of helpful elixirs to get the job done, and while we can't quite rely on magic potions, we can benefit from the sponsor of this video, Geology. They're an award-winning men's skincare company that offer customized skincare routines produced based on a focused set of ingredients with decades of dermatological backing. To get started fighting acne, reducing oiliness, preventing wrinkles, or reducing dark and puffy under eyes, all you need to do is take their 30-second quiz via our link in the description, and they'll design a regimen just for you that comes right to your door. You can start off with their 30-day trial of the complete set, including their everyday face wash, vital morning face cream, repairing night cream, and nourishing eye cream. Then you can buy more of the products you like, or save money by subscribing to 90-day batches. See what the 5,000 plus 5-star reviews are talking about, and make handsome a habit. Use our link in the description to take the skincare quiz now, plus get 50% off the 30-day trial set, just $25 for $50 value, or go to geology.com. That's geologie.com. Kings prefer to wage local wars to expand their influence, while elves have become terrorists fighting for a lost cause. The world needs a savior, a man of the moment, someone to kindle the flame in people's hearts. Jack de Aldersberg, Grand Master of the Order of the Flaming Rose. In the aftermath of the Peace of Sintra, the North was devastated. Entire towns and cities struggled to rebuild after their scouring at Nilfgaardian hands. Amidst a sea of dismay, the Nordlings turned to the opiate of the masses for salvation. Headquartered in the free city of Novigrad, the previously small Cult of the Eternal Fire began rapidly gaining followers amongst nobles, burghers, and peasants alike. Xenophobic prelates of the Flame preached violence against non-humans, forcing elves and dwarves to once more flee into the forests, which revitalized the scoia'tael squads. In response, the Church of the Eternal Flame activated their militant branch, the Order of the Flaming Rose, a knightly chapter principally concerned with ruthlessly hunting down non-human insurgents. Operating out of Temeria, the Order began frequently clashing with scoia'tael commandos in that kingdom. Under provocation of Order knights, Vizima's non-humans had erupted into full-scale rebellion, aided by their scoia'tael brothers. Taking advantage of the chaos he had deliberately incited, the Order's Grand Master Jacques de Aldersberg launched a coup to seize control of the city. Up until this point, King Foltest had been away from his kingdom on matters of state. When he returned to Vizima, he found it in chaos, insurgent non-humans and rebellious aldermen fighting on the streets. Understandably reticent to let de Aldersberg take over his realm, Foltest charged a certain witcher, Geralt of Rivia, with taking him down. While the White Wolf slew the Grand Master, King Foltest's royal army put down both the Flaming Rose Knights and scoia'tael alike. For his role in restoring order to the kingdom, Foltest paid Geralt a hefty reward, but just as the White Wolf was walking out of the royal palace, a masked assassin charged into the throne room. Geralt rushed back, slaying the king's would-be killer. Then, upon examining the corpse, he came upon a foreboding development. The assassin's eyes were amber and cat-like. It was now clear that a sect of witches was conspiring to kill northern kings. King or beggar, what's the difference? One dwan less. Iorveth, scoia'tael commando leader. After the end of the Second Nilfgaardian War, the kingdoms of the north had lost their common enemy and had turned on themselves once more. In 1270, the forces of King Dermawend foiled an attempt by King Henselt to recapture the territory of Upper Aedirn. Meanwhile, Temeria, still recovering from the Grand Master's coup, was thrown into civil war when the nobles launched a rebellion under Baroness Lavalette, the mother of King Foltest's 2 bastard children. In the spring of 1271, while King Dermawend was cruising down the Difna River on a pleasure barge, he was ambushed by another Witcher assassin who made quick work of the king's guards before beheading the monarch himself. Mere months later, King Foltest had captured Lavalette Castle and ascended into said castle's solar to see his bastard children, who were under the care of a blind monk. His guard lowered, Foltest was caught unawares, and his bodyguard, Geralt, was unable to stop the assassin from slitting the king's throat. With 2 of its states now kingless, the north descended into further chaos, and rebellious barons threatened to tear Temeria apart. In Aedirn, the small folk had rallied around a new symbol, a peasant named Saskia, who supposedly had fought and slain a dragon. This charismatic girl, who became known as Saskia the Dragon Slayer and the Virgin of Aedirn, preached ideals of freedom and equality, accumulating a diverse and multiracial following in the Upper Aedirnian settlement of Virgen, a dwarven mining colony. There, Saskia intended to create a new nation, one in which elves, dwarves and men would live as equals. This noble ambition would not go uncontested, as the Kaedwenian king Henselt had not given up his ambitions to annex Upper Aedirn. His attempt the previous year had been foiled, but seeing the territory now defended only by a peasant girl and her mob, he decided to give it another crack, so the Kaedwenian royal army marched upon the city of Virgen. However, Saskia's bands were no pushovers. The dwarves of Virgen were all battle-hardened, many of them veterans of Brenna. Surprisingly, Prince Stennis, son of the late Dermawend, had also supported Saskia. The Virgin and her rebellious peasants were no doubt a threat to his rule, but for now they had a common enemy. Finally, a commando squad of scoia'tael warriors, led by the elf Iorveth, joined the defense in Virgen. Iorveth had in fact aided Foltest's assassin, but the rogue Witcher had since betrayed the elf leader, so Iorveth focused on helping Saskia create a realm where elves could live in peace. All in all, Saskia led an unlikely coalition of warriors held together only by the unifying influence of the Dragon Slayer. When King Henselt had arrived in Upper Aedirn, he set up camp just northwest of the dwarven town across the Pontar River. In his company was Vernon Roche, leader of Temeria's special forces, and his elite squad of patriots, the Blue Stripes. Vernon had no interest in aiding Kaedweni expansion. He was there to track down the killers of his beloved Foltest, which he sought to do by staying close to Henselt, for where better to encounter kingslayers than in the company of a king. Finally, last among the cast of characters congregating in Upper Aedirn was Geralt of Rivia. Expect him to continue intermittently appearing in our story. On the site of where Aedirn and Kaedwen had battled a year earlier, the leaders of both sides met to parley. King Henselt and his sorcerer Deathmold met with Prince Stennis, Saskia and Philippa Eilhart, who in the years since the Second War had quit Redania to become the Dragon Slayer's advisor. As expected, talks broke down quickly into armed conflict, but as blood was shed over the erstwhile battlefield, a curse was activated. The souls of the soldiers who had fought there a year earlier were remanifested back onto the plains they had died on, fighting an endless spectral battle against one another. With the curse now dividing the lands between Virgen and the Kaedweni camp, neither army could reach the other. Internal turmoil began bubbling on both sides. In Virgen, Saskia was poisoned, and while she was saved from death by Philippa Eilhart, she was left in a vegetative state. Dismayed, the peasants of Aedirn accused Prince Stennis of treachery and had him lynched in a brutal display of mob justice. Eventually, Philippa was able to wake Saskia up, using the ancient and prestigious magical school of lesbomancy. Nevertheless, the Dragon Slayer's fragile alliance had been put under immense strain. Meanwhile, in the Kaedweni camp, two cat-eyed shadow blades had crept within arm's reach of Henselt. Roche's intuition had been right. The Kingslayer Witchers were here. Luckily for Henselt, this particular assassination attempt was foiled, once again by the intervention of Geralt of Rivia. Speaking of Geralt, there was still a curse to be lifted, and who else to do it but a professional witcher? Through one means or another, the White Wolf was eventually able to put the battlefield spectres to rest. Finally, the belligerents in Upper Aedirn could turn their hostilities back upon their enemies. The Siege of Virgen was about to begin. My father was a knight with bright eyes. He treated life like a beautiful adventure. He loved humans and tried to understand them. Thanks to him, I believe every man is equal and liberty shouldn't be peddled. Scoia'tael, daughter of villain Tretinmirth. The morning after the spectral fog lifted from the field, the Kaedweni army mustered out of their camp and forded the Pontar, marching for Virgen. All told, King Henselt commanded around 5,000 troops, each professionally armed and trained. In Virgen, the defenders scrambled to man the city's battlements. Between the dwarves, Aedirnian peasants and a handful of Aedirnian knights, the defenders numbered perhaps 1,300. Notably missing was Iorveth, who had left with his elves to find reinforcements but had not yet returned. All told, Saskia's rebels were outnumbered 5-1. At noon, Kaedweni forces were sighted beyond Virgen's west gate, and the battle was joined. Curiously, the defenders had not closed the main gate, but only put up a wooden barricade in its place, stationing a line of Dwarven infantry behind it. A deliberate trap, for the west gate was a long corridor sandwiched by two sides of high polished stone, a bottleneck that the Kaedweni would only be baited into if they believed they could smash through the barrier at its end. The ploy worked, and the first wave of Kaedweni knights charged into the funnel, only to face a hail of Dwarven arbalest fire. What's more, upon each side of the corridor, ancient valves opened, spraying searing hot oil upon all attackers unfortunate enough to be within. It was a clever trick, one that thinned out Kaedweni numbers, but it could only be played once, and Henselt still had many troops in reserve. Without delay, the king ordered a second wave, this time led by a trump card of his own, Deathmold. Striding in at the head of the platoon, the sorcerer invoked a massive fireball that incinerated the wooden barricade, allowing the invaders to pour through. Completely swamped, the Dwarven defenders were forced to pull back to Virgen's second line of defense, where Saskia herself was waiting, ready to hold the line. Meanwhile, Philippa Eilhart had leapt into the fray, engaging Deathmold in a magic duel as both wizards teleported about Virgen's rooftops. Mounting ladders upon the towering Dwarven battlements, Kaedweni forces began a perilous attempt to scale the Aedirnian defences. Thus a fierce melee was joined atop Virgen's inner wall, with the dwarves joined by Aedirnian peasants who locked themselves in a brutal struggle with the cream of Kaedweni knighthood, all while the Dragonslayer led her men wherever the fighting was thickest. Some accounts of this battle even claim that the Witcher Geralt was among the defenders, fighting side by side with Saskia. In any case, although outnumbered, the defenders benefited from their defensive position, only having to fight their opponents piecemeal as they scaled the ladders, rather than all at once. Against the odds, Virgen's line held, and eventually the second wave of attackers was forced to retreat. In the brief respite between waves, Saskia ordered a scouting party to investigate the tunnels beneath the city, which represented a potential security breach. The scouting party never returned, causing the Virgin of Aedirn to suspect foul play. Knowing how devastating a potential backdoor ambush could be, the Dragonslayer decided to investigate the tunnels herself, assumably bringing Geralt with her. Her suspicions were right, for an Aedirnian turncoat had in fact informed Deathmold of the tunnels, and the sorcerer was using them to Trojan horse a platoon of men into Virgen proper. Naturally, a fight ensued, but it did not take long before Geralt and Saskia were overwhelmed by the sorcerer's magic. Faced with a matter of life and death, the Dragonslayer had no choice but to reveal her secret. Massive wings spread across the cavern, and a plume of fire breath incinerated the Kaedweni infiltrators, although Deathmold teleported to safety. Saskia was no Dragonslayer, she was Scoia'tael, daughter of villain Tretinmirth the Golden Scaled. The infiltration attempt foiled, Geralt and Saskia, now back in her human form, rushed back to the surface. News upon the walls was grim. Kaedwen was preparing for a third wave, and this time King Henselt was planning on leading the assault personally. Morale among the Vergenni was low, but the presence of their beloved virgin bolstered their spirit, and they bunkered down for the final assault. Despite their valor, the sheer ferocity and numbers of the Kaedweni knights, invigorated by the presence of their king, threatened to spill out over Virgen's inner walls. But just as the defenders were about to be overwhelmed, reinforcements arrived. The north gate was opened, and elven warriors poured into the city. Iorveth had returned in the nick of time, at the head of every scoia'tael commando in Aedirn. From atop Virgen's high northern battlements, a terrible rain of barbed elven arrows fell upon the exposed Kaedweni knights, wreaking utter devastation across their ranks. Feeling the tide of battle turn decisively against him, Henselt signalled for retreat, but he would have no such luxury, for at this critical moment Virgen's western gates closed behind him, leaving he and his men trapped and cornered. Faced with no other option, the King of Kaedwen raised the white flag of surrender. The Battle of Virgen was over. In the wake of the siege, Kaedwen emerged weakened. Henselt was humiliated in defeat, and much of his kingdom's prestige had been lost. As the losing party, he was forced to recognize the independence of Upper Aedirn, which henceforth would become a free state under Saskia's rule. While Saskia's triumph was a victory for elves, dwarves, human smallfolk, and other oppressed, it represented a bad omen for the stability of the north. Kaedwen had just needlessly exhausted critical resources in a pointless war. Temeria was still kingless and in turmoil, and Aedirn was not only kingless, but now a chunk of its territory was officially a breakaway state. The remaining rulers of the north looked upon their crumbling world order with despair. Something had to be done to right the ship. To that end, a great conclave was called, a council to decide the future of the north, which would be held at the ancient elven ruins of Lokmuin. Witches' schools in the south fell into ruin long ago, and witches themselves became internal exiles, banned from entering most cities. Besides Serid and Orkis, I know of 2 other witches of the School of the Viper who should be alive and on the path. I don't know where they are, haven't seen them for years. Now they can come out of hiding. They can come home. Letho of Gullet, the assassin of kings. One would imagine that the Thanid coup had set a precedent whereby gathering a bunch of politically volatile leaders in a single location during a time of massive geopolitical tension was considered a bad idea, but apparently not. In the spring of 1271, notables began filtering in to Lokmuin. Henselt represented Kaedwen, while Constable John Natalis, war hero at Brenna, represented Temeria in absence of a king. Saskia attended as Queen of Upper Aedirn, while King Radovid represented Redania. Initially, the delegates were principally concerned with the fate of Temeria, with Henselt and Radovid plotting to partition the vulnerable kingdom between themselves. However, Temeria avoided dissolution when Vernon Roche, with Geralt's aid, managed to find and locate Anais Lavalette, Foltest's bastard daughter, and hand her over to the care of John Natalis. With a child with the blood of the royal dynasty in the hands of a widely respected war hero, Temeria, for now, would have its independence preserved. Beyond royals, there was another element present at Lokmuin, the mages. The Lodge of Sorceresses in particular was still subtly rebuilding the influence mages had once had on the northern monarchies, and saw the summit at Lokmuin as the perfect opportunity to petition for the revival of the Brotherhood of Sorcerers and the restoration of their right to choose which mages were appointed to advise, ergo puppet, which king. This was not to be, for at this critical moment, the Nilfgaardian ambassador, Shillard Fitzursterlin, arrived upon the scene with a prisoner in tow, but not just any prisoner, a massive, bald witcher, the Kingslayer. Before all the monarchs of the north, the assassin confessed. He was indeed behind the deaths of Dermawend and Foltest, but it was the scheming wizards. Resentful that they could no longer puppeteer the northern monarchs as they pleased, who had used him as a tool to their ends. chaos erupted in Lokmuin. It did not matter if the mages were truly guilty or not. The Church of the Eternal Flame had been cultivating distrust of magic for years, which all boiled over now. Throughout the city, a wholesale massacre ensued, as mages from the lowliest alchemist to the mightiest sorcerer were hunted down for their role in the Kingslayer conspiracy, real or imagined. In the pandemonium, dragonfire reigned upon the elven ruins. As it turned out, Philippa Eilhart's lesbomancy had actually been a love spell meant to enthrall Saskia to her will. Now the sorceress used Sacenthesis to protect her magical sisters from the massacre, immolating many innocents and soldiers alike in the process. This, however, did not last long, for the spell binding Sacenthesis to Philippa was broken through the intervention of, you guessed it, Geralt of Rivia. After freeing the dragon, Geralt navigated the blood-soaked streets of Lokmuin to meet another old friend. In the abandoned Temerian delegation, the Assassin of Kings, who was really Letho, Witcher of the School of the Viper, met with the White Wolf and laid out his cards. For him, the ultimate goal had been simple: kill as many rulers as we could, lay the blame on the sorceresses, breed chaos, prepare the North, soften it before the invasion. The true mastermind behind everything was a man Geralt had once known well, the White Flame himself, Emma Varem-Rice. All this time, Letho and the other witches of the Viper School had been the tools of the Nilfgaardian Emperor, and they had served their purpose masterfully. The North was cannibalizing itself, its kingdoms falling apart, its remaining kings and queens all scheming against one another, while spearheading violent witch hunts against all mages in their realm. Letho had done well, and now the invasion could proceed as planned. So it was that in the spring of 1272, the banners of the Black Sun crested over the Yaruga for the third and final time. The Third Nilfgaardian War had begun. Our series on the world of The Witcher will continue in the coming weeks, and we're planning to cover the battles throughout many fantasy universes and sci-fi sagas, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Please consider liking and sharing, as that helps immensely. We'll try to read and respond to every comment, as we want to see what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.